Greetings, fellow humans. My name is Serena Slack. Welcome to my floor. I've already filmed the intro to this video once and I had to redo it because I was too far away from my phone and you couldn't hear me. I was drowned out by the sound of drag racing because I live in this city and people are obnoxious. I need to get a better camera. I really do, but I'm gonna persevere. At this time, I refuse to wait to film this video until I do, and damn it, there's art to be done. If you watched my last video, you will remember that I had made a rinky-dink, beautiful mess of a custom watercolor palette out of an Altoid tin that I was very proud of, and if you haven't seen that video, you should. I'll put it in the cards. Please go have a look. But I wasn't really a fan of the Reeves watercolor paints that I had used to occupy that tin. I knew that I probably wasn't going to just stick with those, and I wanted a somewhat decent brand that I can work with alongside, because I don't plan on wasting them, but I just wanted something a little bit better. So anyway, in the mail the other day, where'd they go? Came these. Behold, the Sonnet Studio watercolors. 16 set. I've already busted it open once because I was eager to like get started, and like I said, I'm actually refilming the intro to this video, so we're gonna do a little bit of time travel here, and we're going back into the past so that you can see me swatching my colors, and then from there we are going to do a few paintings with them and we'll see how they go. Also, I got myself a watercolor sketchbook, which I will show to you shortly. A couple of paintbrushes, specifically for watercolor because I didn't want to mix them up with my acrylic brushes, and a kneaded eraser because I needed one of those. Needed. English words. I should get off the floor. Ugh. Let's do this, folks. Let's make art and have fun. Quarantine is making me a crazy recluse. Not that I wasn't a crazy recluse before quarantine. I think it's just amplifying the insanity that already existed within. Shall we? Before we begin, I did want to give you an idea of the other art supplies that I'm going to be working with in this video. I'll probably also use the kneaded eraser, but I think most of you know what one of those look like. But in case you're curious about the specifics of the brushes that I got the brand Artify, and I like that these brushes are black. They look pretty slick, don't they? So hopefully they will work out well enough for me. And then the watercolor sketchbook I got was a Moleskine sketchbook. This is actually like the first Moleskine book I've ever owned in my entire life, and I've always wanted one because I always think they look really cool with like their hard covers, and this one's a very pleasing shape. I know a lot of people like their watercolor sketchbooks to be square, but honestly, most of the paintings that I do IRL, like in acrylics, they are this rectangle shape so that I can do portraits facing this way and landscapes facing this way. I guess I'm a traditionalist in that way. Or at least I am for the most part. I definitely have deviated from that rule. And then because it's a Moleskine book, it's got a pocket in the back, and I love books with pockets. So yeah. Okay, so now that you've gotten a good idea of what's going to be used in this video, the time has come. Okay, so first order of business, of course, is to make my swatches. This set actually came with a swatch card that you saw there. It was just printed on a transparent piece of plastic, so I used that as a template and traced it on top of a piece of watercolor paper. That way it would fit inside the box when I closed it. So I really enjoyed these colors. Even as I was swatching them, I was noticing how vibrant they were, and then getting an idea of how transparent they were as well. The set came recommended to me by both a friend of mine who uses watercolors and by a YouTuber who I really respect, Arlie Bean. I'll try to find the video and link it down below. She has this video where she recommended certain brands of watercolors for people starting out. So when I ran it by my friend in real life and she confirmed that this was worth the money, and it was only about $25 or so, I realized that this was probably a pretty good set for my training wheel days. So I have a confession to make. The painting that you see before you that I'm beginning of my cat Pixel is not the first painting that I did with this set. I had created an entirely different painting on the previous page of my new sketchbook with these watercolors and completely forgot to record it. I guess I was just so excited to get started using my new art supplies that I kind of forgot that I started a YouTube channel. Oops. So I will end up showing that picture to you at the end of the video. But for now, you can watch me sort of getting a feel for the medium and trying to do this picture of my kitty cat. It was a very beautiful photograph that I took of her sitting majestically in a sunbeam, and you'll see that I actually chose to dramatize that beam of light so that there was a very sharp edge. There were some other areas where I took artistic license as well, like you can see a lot of like the electronics on that shelf below her and my TV behind her, and I just omitted that completely from the picture because it was really more important to me to get an understanding of how these watercolors behaved and not necessarily try to go for broke in terms of hyper detail. So it was very important to me to use a picture like this where there was a lot of really bright light and, deep enough shadows where I could practice layering and sort of get depth of tone in certain areas, figure out different hues for different, sorts of angles of the wall and the cabinet that sits below her. I learned that there were areas where I really needed to learn to exhibit some more patience, because when you put a wet wash in one color next to a wet wash in a different color, they will bleed together. And unfortunately, that happened more than once on this piece, and it was getting frustrating to me until I realized what mistakes I was actually making. But eventually, as I progressed in the picture, I was starting to get the hang of it a little bit more. I really do need to just sort of sit back and wait for layers to dry before I proceed, but I was excited, like I said, so I was really interested to just keep working. I think where I succeeded the most is when I started painting my cat. My cat is gray and white, and of course when she's sitting facing the sunlight like that, half of her is going to be completely in shadow while the other half is going to be more so in the light, and there was just a lot of opportunity for me to build up layers of her fur, find different textures where she's more fluffy in certain areas, and to establish where certain parts of her that have darker colored fur are still brighter in the light and then darker in the shadows. And then similarly with certain white parts, like there's that part on her neck that I later filled in with a more off-white color, but it still looks like white fur. I think that's where I actually really succeeded in this picture, was when I was rendering Pixel herself. Now you'll notice that I got this gorgeous colorful watercolor set, and this picture is incredibly monochrome. I took y'all to Brown Town, and it was about halfway through me painting it where I realized that I was going to have to do another piece so that I could really exhibit just how beautiful some of the colors in this set really are and how I can work with them. So while this was a good first attempt, or, second attempt, since I didn't really film the first one, I knew I wanted to show you guys something a little bit more substantial. At the end, I went in with a white gel pen, and I emphasized a lot of her fluffy fur, especially in the front where she's facing the light because it was bright white, and I gave her a few whiskers. I didn't go super crazy with them because the white gel pen really sticks out on a picture this small. Again, I think I did well overall. There are some areas that I see some room for improvement, of course, but considering I don't do very many animals in my artwork anyway, I actually am very proud of this one. The second painting that you are going to see me complete in this video is of myself. This was a selfie on my phone that I took that had even more dramatic lighting than the picture I did of Pixel. It was where I was sitting on my bed when my bedroom had no lights on, but there was like this big beam of sunshine coming in through the door from the other room and had sort of cut my face in half, where one side of my face was totally in bright light and the other half was completely obscured in shadow. And I thought that that was a really compelling image to try to recreate. Like, I really like how sharp and crisp it made certain like shadow lines on my face, on my lips, and certain other facial features look. So I really wanted to use this as my next experiment. I saw a couple of tutorials online of people doing portraits in watercolor where they started with the shadows in tones of blue and green, and those created very cool shadows when they then overlaid them with glazes of the actual skin color that they wanted to use. And I thought that that was a really cool effect. Cool as in it looks super cool, but also cool as in on the cool side of the color spectrum. That just gives a lot more interest to something that could end up looking flat like skin tone. That's something that I always try to do even in my acrylic paintings, is just not make people look like they're made of clay or satin. Give them actual like varying shades of color in their skin tone, because that's how we are as human beings. You know, no matter what kind of skin tone you have, skin is very reflective, like it reflects the light that's around it. And if I'm sitting in a dark bedroom, the shadows on my face are going to be quite cool. It is kind of freaky to look at though. Until I start filling in those skin tones, it looks like half of me is completely alien with those blue tones. I don't know, I just look extraterrestrial. I have this green skin. And then that slowly started to disappear as I started adding warmer colors over top. This part was super fun too. Like, by this time I had already learned my lesson from the previous painting, where I wasn't waiting for certain layers to dry before I started putting washes next to them so they would bleed together. And by this point I think I had started getting the hang of how the watercolors behaved and how I could, you know, layer properly and use the medium properly. So I ended up bouncing around all over this picture quite a little bit. By the way, I am sorry for how much my head obscures what I'm doing. As this video progresses, you'll notice that you'll see less and less of the top of my head, but while I was doing a lot of the washes, especially towards the top of the picture, I was bending over quite a bit. It's a good thing that you're seeing this all sped up, because then I can just pop in and out of frame very quickly, but when I was watching this video back, I noticed just how much of my head was obscuring the work that I was doing. It's really funny to me because I had MacGyvered this hilarious setup whereby I had used my tall wooden easel as a tripod for my phone so that I could film an overhead progression of my work. And I was really proud of that, because I do have a sort of low budget operation going on here. So if you stay to the end of the video, you get to see bonus footage of my overhead camera setup, but I didn't really account for how far I was going to lean over my paper while I was doing this painting, so sorry about that. That's something that I will adjust for next time. I don't know what else to say at this point, other than while I was working on this piece specifically, more so than the last one where I did of my cat, I was having some troubles with confidence because I chose a picture that was so dark in certain places and so bright in certain other ones. I was kind of getting freaked out a little bit as I was going that I wasn't making things dark enough, and that I wasn't sure how much layering I would have to do to match that level of depth of shadow that I was really looking for so that it didn't look wrong, I guess. It's one of those things where I had to exhibit patience in another area, not just for waiting for layers to dry, but also because I was giving myself more time to understand that by the time those layers dried, I could make those colors darker and that things would start popping out and looking a lot less flat. You'll also notice that I pull out this extendable black fan that I have in, like, my costume collection. I love that fan so much. It was actually something that I bought for a party, and I just pulled it out so that I could fan my layers so that I didn't have to wait quite as long for them to dry. It's so counterintuitive to me because when I work with acrylics, I can just keep working. You still have to bounce around in different areas on your canvas because you don't want to overwork your paint. It'll like lift off the canvas sometimes if it's not dry enough. And I feel like that's something I'm familiar with, but you can put two different colors next to each other on a canvas when you're doing acrylic and they won't bleed together. So that was just a new muscle memory I had to establish when doing this piece and the pieces that came before it. I still really like how it came out though. I do think that I went a little over the top with some of the shadows on my face. Like the one above my top lip is a little bit too dark, and on my forehead right under where my hair is, that's maybe a little too dark. Maybe around the eye was a little bit too dark. I kind of went overboard there. But considering that the picture itself was so dramatic, I honestly don't think it turned out too bad. This is a really solid attempt, and I'm pretty proud of it. And then, of course, we get to see the very satisfying shot of me peeling my tape off. I made sure I recorded this part. It's fun for me to do, and I figured it would be fun for you to watch. And here is the bonus footage of this absolutely bizarre camera setup because I don't have a proper tripod. I use my easel and I had to like counterweight it with a textbook. And what I do is like I'll strap my phone up here and then like secure it in place with a rubber band so it won't fall. And then I clipped on, well, you should see what I'm doing here. I clipped on this LED light. And that was that. That's how I did it, guys. Fancy schmancy. High tech. Very professional. Before I sign off, it's time to reveal all of the paintings that I accomplished with my Sonnet Studio watercolors. Here we go. Oh, that's the cover page. Oops, that's a swatch page. I did another swatch page because aesthetics. So this is the first portrait I did. I actually am really proud of this one, considering that it was the first painting that I ever did with this watercolor set. Not bad at all, right? There are areas where I thought it looked just a little bit too splotchy, and this was before I started figuring out how to do wet on wet, where you wet the paper before you start applying your color. So that is probably why I got the result that I did. But regardless, I actually think that this looks pretty decent. You know, there are areas where I kind of rushed through. Like by the time I got to her hair, I was just sort of done. But everything else looks pretty good. I like the folds in this cloth that's on her. And yes, this is a much different picture than the other two that you saw. And here's Pixel to take a look at her portrait. What do you think? Did I do a good job? Did I make you look pretty? You're always pretty. Yeah. She's beautiful. But anyhow, here's the painting that I did. Hey. This is perfectly normal, you guys. I'm used to this. She has to be the center of attention. Get out of the way! I'm trying to film. I'm going to take that as a mark of approval that Pixel likes the depiction of her that I did. I think it turned out rather well. The white pen that I used got a little bit chunky in the front, so it didn't turn out quite as fine of hairs, but I think that's just because I chose such a small canvas to work on. And then I'm actually really proud of this. I know that the shadows are too dark, but I think I can live with that for right now. This was a solid self-portrait. I'm particularly proud of how deep the purples are, and specifically this one sliver of curtain right here that was a little bit more blue than the rest. I think that looks pretty rad. Pixel. She's just like, shut up and love me. It's my turn. You've been at it all day with the videos and the editings and the talking into a microphones. Where's my time? Oh. I always have time for you, my love. Okay, this is the end of the video now. I am going to bed because it's quite late. I will see you in my next video, whenever that may be. Until then, ciao.